Hold up, before we start this wild ride, I want to know, where are you watching from? Is it a calm cul-de-sac in Arizona, a busy apartment tower in New York City, or maybe a quiet lakeside cabin up in Minnesota? It's always awesome to see how far these karma-packed Karen stories go. The sound of shattering glass tore Luke from his late morning coffee. He froze mid-sip, ceramic mug trembling slightly in his hand. Another crash followed, closer, louder. His stomach sank. The sun had barely cleared the rooftops of the cul-de-sac, and already something was wrong. He bolted for the front door, heart pounding. As soon as he stepped onto the porch, the sight hit him like a punch to the chest. Patricia and Cheryl, two figures large, loud, and unmistakably destructive, were standing in the middle of his solar array. Axes raised like medieval executioners. Shards of blue-tinted tempered glass glistened around their feet. Every swing sent fragments flying. The once pristine black panels now looked like a battlefield. "Hey!" Luke yelled, voice cracking with disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" Patricia didn't stop. She turned slightly, grinning with cruel satisfaction. Her light green floral dress billowed in the wind, but she stood steady on the broken panels, her sandals crunching over the damage. Removing unauthorized hardware, she shouted back cheerfully, lifting the axe again. Cheryl didn't even glance at him. She let out a huff of effort and brought her own axe down with a loud metallic thud. Another panel cracked. Another $1,000, gone in a heartbeat. Luke stumbled forward, barefoot on the gravel path, too stunned to speak. Beyond the sisters, parked near the curb, stood a vintage white and blue trailer, the kind used for HOA mobile offices during inspections. And leaning casually against it, watching the chaos unfold, were two HOA board members in tailored gray suits, Mr. Green and Mr. LeBlanc. They said nothing. They didn't intervene. They just watched. "You're trespassing," Luke shouted, voice raw now. "That's private property." Patricia finally stopped, placing the axe head against her shoulder like a baseball bat. "It's shared infrastructure," she said. "HOA regulations. You didn't get board approval." Luke's eyes darted to the panels. He knew she was lying. He had the permits. He had receipts. But none of it mattered. Not with Patricia and Cheryl, because this was never about rules. It was about power, and they had just declared war. 2 weeks earlier, Luke had thought he'd finally found peace. After years of renting in the city, he'd purchased a modest but charming home at the edge of a suburban development called Cypress Hill Estates. It was quiet, tree-lined, with just enough distance between homes to give the illusion of privacy. He'd closed in cash, gotten a deal through a contact in the energy sector, and moved in without so much as a hiccup. The trouble started the day after the solar panels went up. It was a system he'd designed himself, cutting-edge, high-efficiency, and entirely off-grid. $40,000 worth of photovoltaic brilliance. Permitted, legal, flawless. But to Patricia and Cheryl, it might as well have been a personal insult. He first met them at the mailbox cluster. Patricia was already talking when he approached, loud, fast, and fake sweet. She introduced herself as the president of the Cypress Hill Estates HOA, and Cheryl as her sister and vice president. They looked like mirror images, stout, overdressed, and radiating passive aggression. "We take pride in our neighborhood's aesthetic continuity," Patricia had said, eyes scanning Luke's home. "Solar panels aren't very uniform." "I got permits," Luke replied, keeping his tone polite. "And, technically, my property line ends just outside the HOA jurisdiction." Patricia smiled wider, like a predator. "Oh, sweetheart. Everything here falls under the HOA eventually." He didn't take the bait, just nodded and walked off. The letters began the next day. First, it was a warning about grass height. Then a fine for leaving his trash bins visible for more than 8 minutes. Then a demand to remove a decorative owl statue from his porch, too aggressive for children walking past. He ignored them all. When they knocked on his door, he didn't answer. By the end of the first week, Cheryl had installed a motion sensor camera pointing directly at his front door. Luke returned the favor with a polite letter requesting its removal. He got back a photo of his own face taped to a violation notice. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so calculated. Then came the HOA meeting. Luke decided to attend just once to explain himself, make it clear that his system was private, legal, and not subject to their internal zoning. It was a mistake. The meeting was held in the HOA trailer, parked at the edge of the community park. Patricia stood at the front like she owned the world, clipboard in hand, Cheryl flanking her like a bodyguard. "New business," Patricia said, glaring directly at Luke. "Unauthorized solar activity on Lot 49. Luke raised his hand. "With respect, my property isn't under HOA governance. The boundary redrew in 2017. It's in the county records." "That's not how we interpret it," Cheryl snapped. Luke leaned forward. "Interpretation doesn't override county zoning." Patricia's smile twitched. "We'll see about that." She adjourned the meeting 10 minutes later. No vote. No discussion. Just an announcement. "We'll be handling it internally." 2 days later, Luke got a warning letter claiming his panels posed a radiation hazard. He laughed. He didn't laugh long. Now, standing barefoot in a field of broken glass, he felt something inside him harden. This wasn't petty anymore. This wasn't just HOA games. This was sabotage. The police arrived 20 minutes after his call. A single officer, young, disinterested, chewing gum as he stepped around the debris. "I've got a report of vandalism," Luke said immediately. "They came onto my land and destroyed my solar equipment." The officer turned to Patricia, who was now sipping from a metal water bottle like she was on a picnic. "We received an emergency authorization from the HOA," she said smoothly. "These installations were not reviewed or approved by the board." "It's not their land," Luke insisted. "I've got zoning maps inside. It's private property." The officer shrugged. "Sounds like a civil dispute. Not much I can do unless someone was physically threatened." "You're not going to stop them from destroying more." Patricia rested her hand on Cheryl's arm. "We're done for today." The sisters turned, axes now dangling loosely by their sides, and walked slowly back toward the trailer. The two suited men remained quiet, staring at the horizon. The officer handed Luke a copy of the incident report and left. And just like that, they were gone. Luke stood alone in the heat, broken panels all around him. The quiet hum of the gridless inverter flickering its last breath in the background. Wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere, a sprinkler ticked lazily. He crouched beside one of the smashed cells and ran a hand over the fractured glass. This wasn't just about power anymore, not electricity, not control. This was personal. He thought about the smug look on Patricia's face, the quiet compliance of Mr. Green and Mr. LeBlanc, the click of the axe breaking panel after panel, the laughter. And then a question hit him, so sharp and sudden it felt like a wire snapping in his mind. Why were two HOA board members watching? Why say nothing? Why stand there if they had nothing to gain? He stood slowly, eyes narrowing. The sisters were arrogant, but they weren't clever. Not really. If they were acting like they owned the grid, maybe it was because they thought they did. And if they thought they did, Luke's mind spun into overdrive. He turned back toward his house, every step purposeful now, every breath calm and measured. Something didn't add up, and he was going to find out exactly what. Luke didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk, lit by a single lamp, the rest of the house blanketed in silence. His fingers moved over the keyboard, eyes fixed on zoning maps, energy contracts, and land deeds that dated back nearly 2 decades. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched beside stacks of legal papers, and a USB stick blinking softly beside his laptop. Patricia and Cheryl had crossed a line, but they hadn't just acted out of spite. The presence of the two HOA board members, Green and LeBlanc, during the solar panel massacre nagged at him like a splinter in his mind. Silent observers, watchful, nervous. That trailer wasn't just a mobile office. It was the nerve center for something larger, something messier. At 3:12 a.m., Luke finally found something. A scanned PDF of a contract dated 2003. Back then, Cypress Hill Estates had been under development by a now-defunct real estate firm. To cut costs, the developer had opted to lease power rights to a third-party energy company called Meridian Utility Solutions. The deal included substation control and emergency power routing for the entire subdivision, an unusual clause in modern neighborhoods. Luke blinked. Meridian. That name rang a bell. He opened a second tab and typed furiously. 2 months before buying the house, his company, NovaGrid, had acquired dozens of defunct grid assets in a quiet, bundled purchase. Legacy contracts, backwoods substations, outdated switching stations. Most of them were nothing more than scrap value. But Meridian was on the list. His heart began to race. He dug deeper, cross-referencing property IDs and parcel numbers. 15 minutes later, he found it. A map overlay showing the solar controller nodes tied to the Meridian grid. One of them sat dead center in Cypress Hill Estates. He zoomed in. That substation? The one the HOA claimed as theirs? He owned it. Luke leaned back in his chair, stunned. All this time, Patricia and Cheryl had assumed they were the final authority in the neighborhood. But by a perfect storm of outdated contracts and accidental acquisitions, they were dead wrong. And they didn't know it. The power wasn't theirs. It was his. That morning, Luke walked outside to survey the wreckage with new eyes. The air was cool and sharp, the sun just beginning to rise above the rooftops. His solar panels were still lifeless, dead glass and bent metal, but his mind had already moved past them. He wasn't thinking about repairs anymore. He was thinking about leverage. As he stood there, hands on hips, a silver SUV pulled up along the curb. The passenger window rolled down with a chirp. Cheryl. She leaned halfway out the window, her giant sunglasses reflecting the morning light. Just so you know, the HOA's increasing your fines. $200 a day, retroactive to last Friday. Luke didn't flinch. You might want to check who owns your grid before you keep talking. She frowned. What? But Luke didn't answer. He just turned and walked back inside. By noon, a new violation notice had been duct-taped to his front door. This one listed a $1, $200 fine for deliberate noncompliance with HOA standards and hostile communication with HOA leadership. The paper was crumpled and smudged, like Cheryl had balled up before deciding to tape it anyway. Luke left it there. Instead, he spent the day with Max. Max was an old college friend, now working with the city's infrastructure planning office. He was sarcastic, impatient, and brilliant with logistics, and over burgers and fries in a diner off Route 7, Luke told him everything. Max didn't interrupt once. When Luke finished, Max whistled low. You're telling me you own the switchboard that runs backup power for their entire neighborhood? Technically, Luke said. And if I'm reading the contracts right, I can even audit their draw. Max leaned back, eyebrow raised. You're not just sitting on leverage. You're sitting on a live fuse. I need more than contracts, Luke said. I need proof they're misusing the grid, siphoning, lying, something I can show publicly. Max pulled out his laptop and opened a secure city portal. Let's find out how much juice they're burning. Over the next few hours, they traced the power consumption data from the substation node. What they found confirmed Luke's suspicions: massive draw spikes between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., irregular surges tied to the HOA office trailer, and unexplained outages on nearby streets. Patricia and Cheryl weren't just bullies. They were rerouting neighborhood power to avoid paying peak rates. They were thieves. And the kicker? Every kilowatt of stolen energy flowed through a grid he owned. By the time Luke returned home, his plan was already forming. First, he installed smart sensors on the remaining functional nodes, devices that recorded draw volume, peak loads, and device-specific signatures. Then, using archived security footage from his own driveway cameras, he cataloged every time Cheryl stepped onto his lawn to vandalize or intimidate. He had her on video planting the solar scammer sign. He had Patricia screaming at a delivery driver. He had footage of them both swinging axes into private property. He edited it all into one tight, 2-minute clip. Raw. Undeniable. Then he uploaded it to a private server and waited. The next morning, the retaliation escalated. Cheryl had painted a new sign, bigger this time, hammered into his lawn with crooked nails. Communist energy thief. Below it, someone had scrawled in red spray paint on his sidewalk. "No solar scum." Luke stared at it without blinking. Then calmly, quietly, walked to his garage and retrieved a pressure washer. As he scrubbed away the paint, neighbors began to peek out from behind blinds. A few looked sympathetic. A few whispered. But none stepped forward. Not yet. That night, Luke made his move. He cut power to the HOA trailer. Not all of it, just the circuit tied to unauthorized after-hours usage. Enough to kill the air conditioning, trip the servers, and force Patricia to call a very expensive emergency electrician. At 10:41 p.m., she was pacing in the dark, barking orders into her phone under the flickering porch light of the trailer. Luke watched from his front window, sipping tea. He didn't gloat. He documented. The next day, Luke posted the video. It began with a close-up of Patricia's axe crashing through the panels, then cut to the contract proving his ownership of the grid. Next came the audit footage showing power theft. And finally, a slow zoom on Cheryl hammering a sign that read "Solar Scammer" into his yard. He captioned it simply, "What happens when you mess with the wrong engineer?" Within hours, the video began to spread. First locally, neighbors, friends, shared on WhatsApp and Facebook. Then further. By the afternoon, it had hit 30,000 views. Someone tagged a regional consumer advocacy group. A small local news blog picked up. Comments poured in. HOA gone mad. Vandals and floral. I'd watch a documentary on this. By evening, a reporter had reached out for an interview. And the next morning, everything changed. At 9:13 a.m., Luke received an email from Mr. Green. Subject line, "Urgent HOA matter, private meeting request." Luke replied with a single word, "No." At 10:05 a.m., Patricia knocked on his door. He didn't answer. At 11:22 a.m., Cheryl stood in his driveway holding a legal document with trembling hands, screaming that he was in violation of HOA Disrespect Statute 7C. Luke leaned out the window. "That's not a real law." "It should be," she shrieked, ripping the paper in half. At 12 p.m., power went out again in the trailer. This time, Luke cut the connection from his laptop. And at 1:15 p.m., he received a direct call from Mr. LeBlanc. "We need to talk," the board member said carefully. "There may have been oversights. Miscommunication." Luke listened. He said nothing. Mr. LeBlanc cleared his throat. "There's talk of holding a vote. A review of the current leadership. You have support. Quiet support. We didn't realize how far things had gone." Luke finally spoke. "You knew." LeBlanc didn't argue. "Yes." Luke hung up. He stood by the window again, watching the sunlight move slowly across the wrecked panels. A breeze passed through the street, lifting the edges of the hateful sign still lying in the grass, the spray-painted word, "Scum," barely visible now, under fading red. Something was shifting. The sisters had always relied on intimidation, silence, and fear to maintain control. But now the silence was breaking. The neighbors were watching. Some were whispering. And Patricia and Cheryl? They were starting to sweat. Luke could feel the momentum turning. He just wasn't finished yet. The morning the power went out across Cypress Hill Estates, the sky was a vivid, electric blue. Not a cloud in sight. Not a breeze. Just stillness and silence. Every house along Maple Crescent sat quietly in the sun, windows dark, AC units frozen mid-cycle, refrigerator compressors stilled. It was as if the entire neighborhood had drawn in a breath and forgotten how to exhale. But the HOA trailer at the end of the block? That was where the shouting came from. Patricia's voice, shrill and frantic, bounced off the vinyl siding. "Reset the main relay." "Cheryl, I said relay, not router. Do you even know what a breaker box looks like?" Luke stood in his driveway, arms folded, watching the panic unfold with the calm focus of someone who had set every domino in motion and now stood waiting for the last to fall. His phone vibrated in his back pocket again. 22 missed calls from an unknown number. Probably Patricia. Or maybe Cheryl. Or one of the suddenly very nervous board members trying to salvage what little dignity they had left. Too late. The night before, Luke had flipped a series of switches in the grid management app he'd built for NovaGrid, his clean energy company. The trailer, the office servers, the outdoor HOA cameras, even the powered gate near the community pool, all went dark. Not out of spite, but because, as the legal owner of the backup energy infrastructure, he was simply enforcing maintenance downtime. Per policy, he'd attached the necessary documents to an email, of course. Full compliance. Full legality. The sisters just didn't read it. And now, the air in Cypress Hill Estates tasted like their desperation. By noon, 2 electricians had come and gone. Neither could find a fault. Because there wasn't one. The main circuit had been locked out from a separate control hub, located 2 counties over, inside a NovaGrid facility. No one could override it without Luke's digital key. At 12:15, Cheryl stormed up Luke's driveway. Sweat soaked through her pale yellow dress. Floral pattern faded from the sun. Her flip-flops slapped angrily against the concrete. "You've sabotaged our power," she barked. "You can't do this. People are suffering." Luke met her gaze without blinking. "Check your email. You think a few contracts and technical jargon will save you? You're finished." "I think you're panicking," Luke replied. And loud. Her mouth opened, then closed. Red-faced, she turned and stomped away. 5 minutes later, Patricia arrived. No sunglasses this time. No smug smile. Just clenched teeth and shallow breathing. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from losing control. "We're calling an emergency board meeting," she said. "I won't be attending," Luke replied. "You think you're untouchable," she hissed. "You think you can just embarrass us online and get away with this?" Luke took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You trespassed. You vandalized private property. You harassed a homeowner. And now you've been caught stealing power from a grid you didn't even know was under private ownership. And I've documented every step of it." Patricia's eye twitched. Luke continued. "I don't need to embarrass you. You're doing that all by yourself." Her breath hitched, just for a second. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, not back to the trailer, but into the shadow of the 2 board members, now waiting beside a white SUV. Green and LeBlanc. They weren't speaking, just watching. And this time, they didn't look bored. They looked worried. Luke gave them a nod. They didn't nod back. Later that afternoon, the HOA held its emergency meeting, not in the trailer, but in the park gazebo where community cookouts usually took place. Patricia stood at the front, red-faced and visibly sweating, while Cheryl handed out paper copies of a revised bylaw proposal that would supposedly override all private grid contracts within HOA zones. It was desperation in print. Luke didn't attend, but he sent something in his place. A speaker, solar-powered, mounted discreetly beneath the gazebo's roof. At exactly 3 p.m., it clicked on, interrupting Patricia mid-rant with the opening lines of his now viral video. The audio was crystal clear. "This is what happens when you mess with the wrong engineer." The sound of Patricia smashing his solar panels echoed through the speakers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then came the part where Cheryl hammered a wooden sign into Luke's lawn. The contract flashed across the screen. Voiceover, legally, I own the HOA's entire backup energy grid. And then the piece de resistance, Patricia's voice at the last HOA meeting. We control this neighborhood. You're not special. Cheryl lunged at the speaker. Too late. Half the neighborhood had heard it. The fallout came fast. By sunset, over 30 residents had signed a petition demanding Patricia and Cheryl's immediate suspension. Someone had started a neighborhood group chat titled HOA Revolt. Photos of the trailer with its door half open and the lights still out were already circulating online, with hashtags like #KarenGrid and #PowerTrip. Luke wasn't celebrating yet. There was still cleanup to do. First, he filed a formal cease and desist to the HOA for harassment and property damage. Then he sent copies of his ownership documents and footage to the county zoning board, a local journalist, and, just to make things interesting, a state-level consumer protection agency. Then he went to work on rebuilding, not just the solar array, but the relationship with his neighbors. He knocked on doors, offered energy consultations, helped a retired couple set up a battery backup for their medical devices. He explained how shared power worked and how it could benefit everyone if managed fairly. By the end of the week, Luke had more support than he'd ever imagined. And Patricia? She was summoned to court. A class action lawsuit had emerged from within the neighborhood. Residents angry over misused HOA funds, false fines, and energy theft. Cheryl was named co-defendant. The board voted to dissolve their leadership status pending investigation. Luke didn't speak at the hearing. He didn't have to. The footage did all the talking. And the judge, after watching Patricia gleefully destroy private property with an axe, didn't even bother hiding her disdain. She ruled in Luke's favor within 20 minutes. The damages awarded covered the cost of the destroyed panels, legal fees, and then some. Patricia and Cheryl were left speechless, humiliated, powerless. Literally, their trailer was disconnected permanently from the main grid. The final bill for years of unpaid energy siphoning reached nearly $18,000, backdated, with interest. Luke installed a new solar field, bigger this time, with better security, and a small metal plaque at the entrance that read, "Powered by Karma." It didn't stop there. The HOA restructured. Mr. Green, under immense pressure, resigned. Mr. LeBlanc stayed on, but only as a temporary liaison. The board invited Luke to help revise the bylaws. He declined. He didn't want control. He just wanted peace. And he got it. Mostly. Every now and then, he'd see Patricia's SUV creep down the street, windows tinted, engine idling. Sometimes Cheryl was in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, pretending not to stare. They never got out. They never spoke again. But Luke could feel them watching, trying to figure out how everything had turned so completely against them, trying to understand how one man could take back a whole neighborhood with nothing but contracts, sunlight, and patience. He let them wonder. The video topped 6 million views by the end of the month. People started reaching out. Victims of HOA abuse, curious homeowners, legal advisors. A small production company even pitched him an idea for a documentary. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He was still enjoying the quiet. And on a warm Saturday afternoon, standing beside his fully rebuilt solar field, beer in hand, Luke smiled as the new neighborhood kids played nearby. No signs. No shouting. Just peace, finally, humming in the sun. His phone buzzed. A text from Max. "You see the new HOA post? Cheryl's selling scented candles now. Calls herself the Enlightened Sister." Luke chuckled. Typed back, "Tell her I sell light too. Mine just works." As he hit send, he looked across the street. A single patch of shadow moved across Patricia's lawn as a cloud passed overhead. Her porch light flickered. Just once. Luke raised his beer in silent salute and turned back toward the sun.